So we're just going to have to rely on Zach to tell us about all the old Florida roadside attractions. So please welcome James Zacharias.
All right, thank you very much.
Doesn't matter.
Let me go ahead and use this mic because I think you'll be able to hear me a little better. So, my name's Zacharias. That's kind of my nickname is Zach, and I've lived in Florida my whole life. How many of you are native to Florida and born and raised in Florida? Okay, just like me. So, I was raised in a place they actually call like the sixth borough of New York, which is Miami. So I was born and raised in Miami because if you weren't really of Cuban descent, you were from New York. And all my friends were their families were from New York. But my family was my dad came from South Chicago, and he moved to Miami Beach when he was about 15 in the 1930s. And my mom moved when she was 4 years old from Cleveland, Ohio, to Miami Beach. And so then they met down there, and that's how I was born and raised. I work at the Museum of Arts and Sciences, and I've been there just not that long. I haven't been at the museum that long, 24 years. I started out as a docent. And I think I've attended every university in the state of Florida, by the way. So anyway, so I worked my way up, and I've been there, and I love the museum quite a bit. And I've got a slide here real quick. I'll just show you a little bit about the museum before we get started. So I'll give you a little bit about what I do. So I'm the senior curator of education and history at the museum, and I do most of the children's programming and the adult programming, almost all the programming for the museum, and also curate exhibits. And I specialize in Florida history, but it's a general museum. It's an art, science, and history museum. There are very few museums in the United States that do art, science, and history, and it's a privately funded museum. When I started at the museum, it was 45,000 square feet, which is considered a pretty large museum in the United States, believe it or not. And most museums are privately funded in the United States. And then we've been through a 7-year expansion program, and the museum is now 145,000 square feet and is the largest museum in the Southeast United States. We were the first museum in Florida that was Smithsonian affiliate, and we're a nationally accredited museum, and we have 30,000 objects in the permanent collection. And I know I can tell you, I can give you a nice gloss on all 30,000. No, I can't. But anyway, so it's really mind-boggling. So I've really had to become a generalist over all these 24 years working at the museum. But I love it, and it's what I've done most of my adult life. And so, but anyway, this is the whole, that's the entrance. It sort of looks like a military complex out there. We could be making anthrax or something like that there. You don't know. But that's being redone. And now there's a new lobby that opens in 2 weeks, and it's a beautiful lobby, and it looks fantastic. But we have an amazing collection. We have a visible storage exhibit with 6,000 objects, most of them decorative arts. And there's only, I think, 4 visible storage galleries in North America. And there's a nice little sleigh bed there. That's no ordinary sleigh bed. That belonged to Napoleon. That was his personal bed from his personal chambers at Versailles. We got it at a garage sale down the, no, I'm kidding, we didn't. But when I tell you this name, you'll realize how we got it. William Randolph. Yes, that's how we got it. And so it's pretty amazing to see that artifact there. The museum has so many one-of-a-kinds. I won't go too far. There's a giant ground sloth skeleton that stands 14 feet. It's the best example of a giant ground sloth in the world. It's the most complete. It was found 2 miles south of the museum. I discovered in 2011 a complete mastodon. That's a mammoth, but mastodon is its cousin. It's now on display as well. There's a glyptodont. I see you have some glyptodont fossils over there as well. We have this new building, which is a building that sits outside of our museum. That's the C.C. and Hyatt Brown Museum of Florida Art. It's the largest collection of Florida art, historical Florida landscapes in the world, about 3,000 paintings. Many of these Florida landscapes date back to most of them are in the 1880s, 1890s. The earliest date back to 1839. We have over 600 oil paintings and watercolors of St. Augustine. So, the Browns, they own Brown & Brown Insurance, which is on the New York Stock Exchange. They have a few highwaymen. They don't collect much folk art. They collect mainly fine art, and many of the best landscape painters in the world are represented in that collection. They all came to Florida as tourists. And then the West Wing, we have the second largest collection of Coca-Cola artifacts in the world. Chinese Gallery, the only one north of Palm Beach. We have the largest collection of African art in the state. We also have the largest collection of Cuban art in the free world outside of Cuba. It's the General Fulgencio Batista collection, who gave seed money to start the museum. He lived in Daytona Beach, and he collected art. And the art from Cuba is very, very European. It's not Caribbean in its look. It's very European and very much like the Renaissance. But I could go on and on about that. And there's trains, and there's so many one-of-a-kinds, and we'd be here all day. But I'm here to talk to you about Florida history because I love Florida history. And I'm here to talk to you about roadside attractions. And there's one thing about roadside attractions in Florida is that when you were a kid, they all seemed awesome. When you're an adult, they all seem like a tourist trap. And I remember passing by so many of them, like McKee Jungle and Garden, saying, "Oh man, I want to go there, Mom and Dad." And they're like, "No, we're not stopping there. It's a tourist trap. They charge 55 cents a gallon for gas there. I'm going down the street to get it at 50 cents a gallon." That's what I told my dad. Every state had these roadside attractions, but Florida was really one of the kings of the roadside attraction because Florida's always been for sale. I mean, it's been for sale for different reasons. It's been for sale for your health, which is why my grandfather came down. It's been for sale as a sportsman's paradise. That's why so many people came down to St. Johns River and to Northeast Florida. It's been for sale for a second chance. It's been for sale for entrepreneurs. And all these roadside owners were entrepreneurs. And they all had a spark, an idea that, I can do this to make money. And most of these were on US 1, Orange Blossom Trail, or on the early roads. They were on the early roads. But then when the interstate, like the Sunshine State Parkway, the Turnpike, and interstates came in, they were bypassed and they were kind of forgotten to time. And then in the 60s, Goliath was looming around in Ocala looking for cheap land. This Goliath, looking for cheap land, almost bought land in Ocala right down the street from Silver Springs, which was really the number one tourist attraction for a very long time. But that's a whole other story. But this Goliath said, "There's cheap land for $200 an acre near the intersection of Interstate 4 and the Florida Turnpike." And that Goliath's name was Walt Disney, which came in and knocked all these out. Because before Disney, if you wanted a roadside attraction, you had to have an alligator pit. You had to have rattlesnakes. You had to have lots of kooky things. Because most of the early roadside attractions were based on the natural history of Florida. This is why so many artists, landscape artists, came to Florida. They fell in love with the exotic nature of Florida. And of course, the timing is right, automobiles. And if you could afford an automobile back then, you could afford to go on a vacation. And so, after the Civil War, Florida exploded in tourism. There's other times when it exploded as tourism, but Florida became a land of tourism, a place for your health, warm weather as well, sold as that. So there were many reasons. And many of the ways you got into Florida early on was through steamships, and then the railroad, and then vehicles. And so we're going to crisscross the state and see some of these roadside attractions that are not here anymore. I can't get to all of them. If I leave out your favorite one, I'm sorry. But there were hundreds of them. Every county had them. And I just can't do all of them because we would be here till midnight tomorrow if we went over all of them. And the historical information, a lot of them, sometimes it's very sketchy and there isn't a whole lot. And I could ring off a dozen that I know of that there just really isn't a whole lot of information about. So people came down into Florida. Became a land of the wealthy. Henry Flagler developed St. Augustine's, the Newport of the South. But Florida's always been for sale. And one thing you got to keep in mind about these roadside attraction is the authenticity was a little bit in question. They were whimsical. It was an age of whimsical. Oh man, if you got a dinosaur, that's the bomb. Oh, you got to have a dinosaur. That would be great. If you can get a dinosaur or something like this to get people to stop. And when I've done research for this, I think people are missing the point. This is really selling to kids and to families. Because usually mom and dad aren't going to stop it, but when the kids start saying, we got to go there, Dad, well, let's go, and then you want to say, okay, I'll be nice, my kids will go, we'll go see the world's largest ball of twine or whatever it is. So a lot of times these are really sold to kids because kids want to see that. They want to see rattlesnakes and cobras and things like that. So post-World War II is really kind of the heyday of of this age of whimsy and concrete dinosaurs. They were very garish, cheesy, okay? Questionable authenticity in the heyday 1945 to 1971, but we're going to go back even further to 1881, which I consider we'll get to the first roadside attraction, which I think is absolutely amazing. And we actually have a landscape painting hanging right now in that Brown Museum I was telling you about, the Brown Museum of it. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the parrot jungle. Most of these are defunct. There is a parrot jungle, but it's out on Miami Beach now, and it's changed its name, and it's kind of its theme. I lived 2 houses down from the parrot jungle in Kendall, Coral Gables. It's very close to University of Miami, and it was started by an Austrian named Franz Scheer. And I remember all through my childhood, because we lived there till I was 20 years old, and I'd be sitting on the porch and there'd be parrots in the backyard. But Franz Scheer also lived across the street from me, and he owned this parrot jungle, and he had, when he came to Florida in the early 1920s, he had a dry goods store down in Homestead. And he had a parrot there named Zebra. And people came into the store and they get their dry goods, but they seemed more infatuated with anything else, that parrot. And that sparked the idea, well, if people like this parrot so much more, I can give up this dumpy dry goods store and maybe do a thing about birds that are uncaged running around free in a park. And that's what he did. So he bought about 80 acres or so in a hammock, in a natural hammock setting on the outskirts of Miami. At that time, it was in Kendall in the 1920s and 1930s, and it was called Parrot Jungle. And he made a lot of coral rock structures, and he had parrot shows, and parrots on high wires, and parrots doing all types of crazy things, and bamboo this big around, and palm trees, and you would wind through, this nature garden, and the flamingos would go around. I would hear the whistle from the flamingos every day going around the pond, and the flamingos would do all these crazy things. It's known as Pinecrest today, and I remember on certain days, holidays, the cars would be parked in our yard. That's how popular it was. And then it moved out to Miami Beach, and then a few years later I thought, can we move back? Because it's not doing as well. They were trying to capitalize on the cruise ship people coming in, and it didn't go very well. And people were antsy to get on the cruise ship and not go to kind of a garish, cheesy parrot jungle type thing. But even famous people, they were serving over 1 million visitors a year at times. Steven Spielberg, Winston Churchill, President Jimmy Carter. I wish I had known they all were there. I would have gone there that day. They had a restaurant. And then, when I was a child, I remember taking my uncle from Chicago down, Uncle Arthur. And Uncle Arthur had some health problems. And he kind of walked a little bit like Frankenstein. So he wasn't very agile. And he wanted to look in the alligator pen, okay, because it had alligator pits, right? You got to have that. And I remember he put his leg up on there, and he looked over, and he toppled right into the alligator pit. Now, I'm the youngest of 4. My sister ran to get the curator, the zoo curator, ran screaming and yelling, and then finally, I think the alligator was terrified, and they eventually got him out, and then they said, please don't come back. You can go there today, and it's absolutely amazing. It's only a couple dollars now to go in there and walk around this incredible native hammock that is just amazing with all these exotic palms. And Miami is really an amazing place. It's an incredible melting pot. But if you know where to go, it's like any big city. If you know where to go, it's fantastic. If you don't know where to go, you think, oh, well, I'm never coming back here. So there's the parrot jungle, there's the flamingos. There's the ball pit that they, built some of the structures with. And this is basically based on uncaged birds. That was his idea. Anybody ever have an idea like, hey, I'm going to do a theme park based on uncaged parrots? That's my moneymaker. He actually made a lot of money. He lived across the street at a really nice home. And then, of course, had all these incredible gardens and shows and things like that. And I got pictures of me as a kid there. But if you go there, it's kind of just like a botanical garden today. And it's quite amazing. I mean, oh, wow, it's amazing. It's beautiful. There's kind of the entrance. A lot of times I include postcards. Postcards kind of came around around 1868. And these sites are a real treasure of Florida history, these roadside attractions. And so are postcards. They're an amazing treasure of Florida history for us. They kind of document a Kodak moment in our history and in our time. Really, really amazing. I love postcards. I always include postcards in a lot of my presentations on Florida history on different topics. Rattlesnake headquarters, located at the entrance of the Gandy Bridge. Had its own post office, and it was really popular just to go there and mail something to your kin back at home, so you would say Rattlesnake, Florida. The Depression plays into a lot of these, so George N. was up in Ohio, said, you know what? I'm going to Florida to make my fortune. So he ends up in Arcadia, and he was growing crops down, and he realized his crops weren't growing very good, but there were a lot of rattlesnakes everywhere. So one day, him and his sons killed a rattlesnake, and they were skinning it, and they decided, well, let me cook this up and see what it's like. And he cooks it up, and he tastes it, and he goes, this is not too bad. Sparks an idea. He decides to open up a cannery, an emporium, doing snake snacks, rattlesnake snacks, in supreme sauce, secret sauce. Basically in mushroom and in heavy cream. And it was in Arcadia, and then eventually the operation grew and grew and grew. He moved it up here to this area, and was basically based right out at right in front of the Gandy Bridge, and it was called Rattlesnake, Florida. It's not called that obviously anymore, and had a post office there. And he sold all types of snake junk, snake rattles, skins, boots, hats, whatever you want, snake heads. But what he was really doing was selling these snake snacks that this is funny. I'll tell you this. I want to read this to you because I don't want to. It's so funny. I want to make sure I get it right. George End. Let's see. He had a company, and it was called Floridan Products. And then on the can it said Rattlesnake Division, Arcadia, Florida. All types of novelties. He would even sell you live snakes if you want to take one of those home, on your vacation. Snake fat, snake oils, really fun. Oh, he even said that if you wanted really a tasty treat, you take my snake in the spring sauce and put it into a pastry shell. That's really good. Or he really recommended you take that snake and then you put it on a thin slice of toast. Very nice. He was quite an incredible promoter. He could promote things like nobody's business. He's a fantastic PR guy. And he promoted it basically as a delicacy. And here was a great slogan he had. Be the first in your neighborhood to give a rattlesnake dinner. And then, then he had that, if you came to the processing plant or to the emporium, and you could watch snake shows and milkings and venom and all that type of stuff where they get the venom out. And he did anti-venom. You ate some of the snacks there. He had a club. And you would immediately be enrolled in the club if you ate some of the snake snacks. And it was called the Subtle Society of Snake Snackers. And you got a card and he signed it. And then he changed it to Rattlesnake Revelers Club. So man, this guy knew how to sell. He was great. And that's it. Rattlesnake headquarters, Rattlesnake, Florida. There's the canned genuine diamondback rattlesnake with supreme sauce. Floridian Products Corporation, Arcadian, Florida. And this is what he did. He milked snakes to attract people. Sold this stuff all across the country because people, wanted to taste exotic things. And there's the original operation in Arcadia. And then there's your club card if you want to eat a rattlesnake there. So he had different names for it at different times. One day, George was doing a live show with a 6-foot diamondback rattlesnake. Doing a live show, and then all of a sudden he got tagged on the hand. He got bit on the hand. He'd never been bit before. He considered himself by this time an expert in snake handling, and he immediately gave himself the anti-venom, and it didn't work, and he died 6 hours later. So George met his end, unfortunately, by the rattlesnakes that he was exploiting through the scrub. Because, in Arcadia and in that area back then, it's so undeveloped, and it was just endless miles of scrub. So poor George ended up. So it was sold, his wife took it over, and everything was sold, and then it was basically annexed into Tampa, and all the snakes were sold to, some of you might have heard of the Ross Allen out of Silver Springs. So that's the story of Rattlesnake, Florida. Reptile Land. Again, a lot of these are based, as I said, on natural history. So this is pretty funny. So this is a guy named, I think Charles Garvin is his name. Now he's got this zoo in Kentucky, in Bowling Green. That's where he's from. And he's got this zoo, and it operates in the warmer months, and it's near a World War II base. And it's pretty popular, but in the winter he can't keep cheetahs and elephants or whatever it is he's got up there because they're going to die. So he brings them down to Florida to near the Jacksonville area on Route 301. So he has a carnival hand who helps him with these animals. Says, hey, why don't we just set up the same operation here? And we'll run it in both places. Well, eventually it was becoming really successful here, Reptile Land. And he said, make the zoo free. But we're going to make your money on the pecan log and the milkshakes and 3,000 novelty things that you could sell in there. So the real business was selling pecan logs and milkshakes and hot dogs, but the zoo was secondary. And so he had moved it down here, and it became so popular that he ended up closing his Kentucky operation, and he ran Reptile World here free time. Plus, then you could get gas. And so it was just southwest of Jacksonville. He had about 100 different animals. But like most things in 301, other routes open up, other highways open up, and people take different routes, and then they end up it just kind of falls into history. But really amazing photos. So great, we still have photos and postcards of that. And they don't make cars like that anymore. So look, milkshakes, orange juice, coffee. Sort of like an early Stuckey's, except for the zoo. Go Stuckey's. Remember golf gas stations used to be on every corner. Boy, what the kids have missed today. Remember, you never had to pump your own gas? Remember that? Bongo Land is right down the street from the museum on an old slave plantation. This was a sugar mill slave plantation in East Florida during the second Spanish period, and it was called the Dunlawton Sugar Mill. And there's the sugar mill ruins made of coquina, and there's sugar vats in there, and it had 100 slaves that worked the fields there, and 1,000 acres that were granted by the Spanish. Well, eventually it goes through several there's a pretty big seminal battle that takes here called the Battle of Dunlawton with Wildcat, and pretty interesting story, but another story for another time. But anyway, so Bongo Land becomes a theme park by a dermatologist named what's his name? Let me see. Manny's friend. His name is Dr. Sperber, and Dr. Sperber is considered a local quack because he's into this new thing called dermabrasion. Everybody thought that was pretty quacky. And then he wrote a book called Sex and Dinosaurs because he believed everything was related back to dinosaurs and everything had a common ancestor. So he was kind of ahead of his time. But he got this idea, and he leased this property, and he got this idea. Yeah, forget the dermatology business. I'm going to open up Bongo Land. And he owned a baboon, and it was named Bongo, and that's where he got the name Bongo Land. And he had this little train that went through the property, and a Seminole Indian village, and a gift shop. And then he had these incredible prehistoric cement dinosaurs that were made by another doctor named Manny Lawrence. They're made out of concrete chicken wire, which is, for a lot of people who are not skilled sculptors, usually the common material. If you're not skilled in sculpture, you use chicken wire and concrete. My friend, he's a pretty good sculptor, and he uses chicken wire and paper mache. And he makes dinosaurs. So this is pretty amazing. There's a T-Rex out there, dating back thousands of years. Stegosaurus. And it closed for lack of public interest. It was only open a few years. But it's amazing that it would open up this theme park on an old slave plantation, and it's really odd. It's a really odd place for that. And what's amazing is that people I've talked to, they said they remember these trucks going down US 1 through Daytona area, and there was these huge concrete dinosaurs on these flatbed trucks being delivered to the theme park. And so it's pretty amazing. There it is, Bongo Land. There's a Triceratops, ruins of the sugar mill plantation, Stegosaurus, and then closed due to lack of interest. There's some more of it right there. It's been restored recently, and it's a botanical garden today. So if you're ever over there, it's a really fantastic place. It's so neat and so unique. Concrete dinosaurs were very popular in the age of whimsy, so he was trying to capitalize on that. Except dinosaurs go back 65 to 100 million years ago. Not too far down the street, there was the atomic tunnel from that. So US 1 had a lot of these stops because that was the main route into Florida. And so, you're driving by like, Mom, Dad, we got to stop at the atomic tunnel. Well, kids got to get in to be disappointed. It's really a ruse to sell orchids. And what 10-year-old is going to be interested in orchids? But it's sold as the above-ground atomic nuclear fallout shelter called the atomic tunnel, but we're really selling birds, exotic plants, and mainly orchids. And what fallout shelter has 900 portholes and is above ground? And is made of stucco, chicken wire, and cement. And it had these pods, and it had piranha, walking catfish, a beautiful bikini girl who we recently had talked to and gotten her take on it. And it was built by W.R. Johnston, and it was this long donut-shaped concrete, I don't know, roadside attraction, I guess. And it had all this exotic stuff, and it went through all these different names, and then the final incarnation was, let's sell it as an atomic tunnel. Of course, this would be the last place you'd want to be if there was that. There's one of the Bill's Happy, the walking fish, and you could prod him into walking from across a 3-foot path into the next little water tank. And that was the big deal. Oh, there goes Happy, he's walking 3 feet across the path, on the crushed gravel path, into the next tank. That was pretty cool. Gotta have piranha. So also, there's a state park called Ponce de Leon Springs State Park. It's one of those big magnitude 20 million gallon springs over there in my area that's pretty popular, pretty common over there. And it's called De Leon Springs State Park because it was, fountain of youth. And there's a famous, it's basically a slave plantation again. And then there's an old sugar mill house there where they flip pancakes. And you can make your own pancakes there. And there's the spring and the pancake. It's a state park. Governor Bob Graham, dedicated to the state park, acquired it, thank goodness, and saved it. And it was quite amazing because I know that the director from the state park who runs that state park. And I said, I didn't know that Ponce de Leon loved to flip his own pancakes. And I'll see sometimes on outreach at other events, I'll see some of his employees, and I'll go up there and I'll go, hey, I didn't know Ponce de Leon was at that spring, and he hung around there, was looking for fountain youth, and they're like, oh. So it's a really bad name because Ponce de Leon was never there. But they had these sculptures out front, and before it became the state park, It was called Nature's Camera Land. And of course the advertiser says, you got to bring your camera. And they had snake pits, and they had an oriental garden, an oriental bridge, and they had actually a scuba school where you could learn to scuba in the spring. And it had jungle cruise, monkeys. It was called Nature's Camera Land. And then it had these sculptures out front which have been stolen. They've been long gone. The Bathing Beauty is gone, and possibly was gone, but they replicated him. And so it had a hotel, a 14-room hotel, where guests would stay on the spring. It's quite gorgeous. It's a great place to go if you've ever been there. It's a state park. But it was torn down in the 60s because it got termite infested, and it had to be torn down. And then it had 2 water skiing elephants, Queenie and Sunshine Sally, which were big attractions at Nature's Camera Land, which is now Dugong Springs State Park. It's basically on 2 boats. Anybody ever into Pirates World? Yeah. Oh, okay. I went to Pirates World when I was probably 6, and I was amazed at Pirates World. It's basically carnival rides with a pirate theme. That's what it is. And it opened up in Dania, and in 1967. And I remember as a child going up and seeing this huge pirate ship, and all that they had life size, and it would go down this river. And there'd be these pirate battles going on, and cannon fire, and pirates swinging from ropes, and it was quite amazing. And what I didn't know is that they acquired all their carnival rides secondhand from other places. So Coney Island, the World's Fair. There's the Belgian Tower, the Crow's Nest aerial tower, acquired from the Belgian part of the World's Fair in New York. And it was on US 1 in Dania. It had the Wild Mouse Rock. Oh, it had the log flume. And it was doing pretty well until Goliath came. And nobody said, I'm not going to spend all this money in Pirates World. We're going to go to Disney. So and we went to Pirates World once, and once Disney opened, that's where we went. I mean, we were part of that demographic and those statistics of, forget all that other stuff, we're going to Disney World. And we went once a year. My parents had a vacation home in Melbourne Beach, so we just go over on 192 straight in. And when we first did that, there was nothing in Kissimmee, St. Cloud, and 192. There was nothing. You passed a McDonald's and you're like, oh my gosh, civilization. And then you got to Disney. It closed in 1975 in bankruptcy. This is what got them into a lot of trouble. So we got falling attendance. The attendance is falling. Let's do rock concerts because that will bring in such a good element. So they started to bring in rock concerts. And I'm going to tell you, the list of people that they brought in is quite impressive. But riots broke out, police got injured, and there was all types of fighting at these rock concerts, and drinking. And let's see, they had Led Zeppelin, Rolling Stones, Santana, Moody Blues, Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Mr. Kincaid and the Partridge Family also played there as well. So and there's even a bigger list of that at Pirates World. It's in Dania. Now it's condos. I remember that sculpture out front. There's the log flume. I'm always a big fan of the log flume because you can get cooled off in Florida on the log flume because at the very end you get sprayed and it cools you off. So we're going to go way back to 1888 to what I consider to be the first roadside attraction in St. Augustine. This is Dr. Vedder's Museum. Now, Dr. Vedder, he sounds awesome. He was a self-taught itinerant dentist. And he was one of these wild guys. He lived a crazy life. He was a mercenary, a locomotive engineer. He spent a lot of time in Cuba. And he came from Cuba, and he rents this building here, which is quite historical. It's the Panton and Leslie trading house. The Panton and Leslie trading house firm had a monopoly on trade for the Spanish in the second Spanish period. And there was an English firm, but they traded and tried to keep relations good with the Seminoles all throughout North Florida. So that was a really important building. It's not there anymore. It burned down. Oh, here's the postcard. Of course, there's the iconic alligator, right? And you see that a lot in landscape paintings and postcards. It's the most sought after animal, for sure. But Dr. Vedder was interesting. So he opened up a dentist shop in 1888, and then he had, some live animals in there and specimens. But he realized that his clientele going into that building seemed to like the live animals better than his dentistry, because he was self-taught. And I think, who knows, he just probably said, I'm a dentist, and that's what I'm at today. But he decides his last career choice is going to be zoo curator, and that's what he does. So he decides to shut down the dentistry practice and just focus on the zoo curating business. And he brings in like live sharks in a tank, and he feeds them, and he has feedings of rattlesnakes. He would even pack and ship baby alligators alive on the train, on Flagler's train, back up to New York with you. So you could take baby alligators back up north with you once the season ended. That's why there's alligators in the sewers in New York. Well, no, not really. That's a myth. It sounds good. We are in the day of making up stuff, right? This is not the age of reptiles. This is the age of making up stuff. Or the age of mammals. So Dr. Vedder was pretty interesting. And this is interesting because 1888 is an interesting year in St. Augustine. That's the year the magnificent resort of resorts in the world opened up, the Ponce de Leon. And so you always have to have stuff to do when you go on vacation. And when these rich, wealthy people came down, they stayed for the entire season. And so one of the things that they did is you could go and see this museum, and you could watch alligators being fed and all types of stuffed taxidermied animals in there, and see Dr. Vedder and his menagerie and all his craziness that he goes in there. So there he is, self-taught dentist from Schenectady, New York, locomotive engineer, exotic birds, monster man-eating shark, gift shop, died in 1899. There's an excellent portrait of two young African-American boys out in front of the museum, the Panton and Leslie trading firm, which is no longer there. It was located right by the Bridge Alliance, if you know where that is. So it was right there. It was right there, right in the heart of town. And that's the oil painting we have it by Frank Henry Shapley, who's one of the most prolific landscape painters in Florida history, and if not in American history. And he was a realist, and he also was a topographical painter. He was an illustrator by training. And because a lot of landscape artists wanted to use Native Americans, well, they were gone in Florida, so he substituted African Americans in his pictures. And there's a Menorcan craft here, and there's the museum. So a lot of the historical societies in St. Augustine, they'll look at his paintings when they want to go back and restore certain aspects of the city. They'll actually reference his paintings because he was a realist and topographical in the nature of what he painted. It was an oil painting. I think we have 27 of his paintings, all of St. Augustine. The Miami Serpentarium, Bill Haast. This was 2 blocks from my high school. I talked to Governor Scott. I said, look, we got to drop the Sunshine State logo. We got to call ourselves Rattlesnake Heaven, because this is the land of rattlesnakes. Bill Haast, as a boy, loves snakes. He just don't like snakes. He likes poisonous snakes. When he was 9 years old, he got his first snake out up in New Jersey. But when he was 12 years old, he had a catalog. And he purchased his first diamondback rattlesnake in the catalog. And the catalog was from Eureka, Florida. And they sent him this live rattlesnake up to New Jersey. And he said, we got to move to Florida, Mom and Dad. We got to move to Florida. So when he became 18, he moved to Florida. He went out into the Everglades and worked at a moonshine still. And then because of the 21st Amendment and the crackdown on that type of thing, the feds busted up the operation that he worked for. And then he decided, he got an idea, you know what, I'm going to do what I love. Poisonous snakes. That's what he's going to do. And when he was in World War II, he was on a relief missions to Africa and Asia, and they'd be flying out there to take supplies. And when the other military men were, at the bars and visiting the nightlife, he was out in the jungles looking for poisonous snakes, and he would capture poisonous snakes, and he would bring them back. Well, how did you get them through customs? He put them in the bottom of his toolbox, and that's how he got them through customs. So while in South Florida, he decided he was going to do research and prove to the world that venomous snakes could have a health and a medical benefit. So he opened up this tourist attraction called the Serpentarium that funded his medical research with snake venom. That's his spark. That's his idea. And he starts to inject himself with cocktails of venom from cobras, black mambas, rattlesnakes, you name it. And to build up an immunity. I think this microphone went out. Okay. To build up his immunity, so he would inject himself every day. He was bit 173 times. When he died, his hands were so nerve damaged he couldn't move his hands. They were gnarled like this. But he was really, really popular. And he would have these snake shows, and he would wear his signature, doctor's smock, and he would come in, a big show. I remember I went one time, because I am phobic about snakes, so I'm really in the wrong state. I do not like snakes at all. And so I remember going and being really creeped out, because I'm not a snake person. And he would milk the snakes, and then he would do research, and he tried to prove to the government, the United States government, that this could help polio victims, people with multiple sclerosis, or asthma, or arthritis, and that this had, and he said, if I live to 100 years old, I will prove it, because I've been injecting myself, and I've been bit 173 times. He lived to 99. He saved 21 people around the world who were bit by very venomous and poisonous snakes, and he was flown there and given transfusions and saved their lives. His research lab, taken over by his family, still exists down there today, and they have saved over 1,000 lives in South Florida from their anti-venom that they produce. So they produce a really high grade of anti-venom. So if you get bit, then it probably came from the Serpentarium laboratories. But to fund all that, he had this tourist attraction right there on US 1. And it is 35-foot concrete cobra with this huge hood, and it stood out over US 1, and you literally drove underneath it. He had a crocodile pit. He had a crocodile that was 2,000 pounds. His name was Cookie. And I remember this, and I remember doing research, and I remember hearing about this, but maybe this is one of these urban legends. And I remember a boy died at the park. And I researched it, looked in the Miami Herald, and said, oh, it was true, it was an urban legend. So this young boy, I guess, had climbed up to look down into Cookie's pen, and he fell in. And Cookie immediately thought it was food and ran over there and grabbed the boy. Bill Haas ran in there, jumped into the pit, other people did, he's hitting it over the head. Cookie dragged the boy underwater into the pond, and he was killed. The boy was killed. So that night, Bill Haas got his Luger out, and he shot Cookie and buried Cookie on the ground on the grounds. And he literally weighed 2,000 pounds. But he had all these other reptiles as well. It was demolition in 1980s, and then now there's a McDonald's on the site. So underneath that McDonald's, Cookie is buried under the McDonald's. People don't know that. So South Miami High School's, they're the Cobras, and they tried to move that to the high school, and it fell apart. He was on Merv Griffin, Johnny Carson, Mike Douglas show, so he was pretty world famous. He really was. There's, some parts of it, it's creepy for me because I'm not a Cobra fan. Most people aren't. There's his wife and his get up there that he's got. Lasted a long time. McKee Jungle and Garden. So we would go from Miami to our home in Melbourne Beach that we had as vacation home. But back then, 95 wasn't connected all the way. It stopped in Palm Beach. And then you couldn't pick it up until South Melbourne. So it was this huge break in 95. It was never all the way down, if you can believe that. So you had to take the turnpike, and then you got off at 60, and then you weaved around through Vero Beach, the west side of Vero Beach, and then this road spit you out onto US 1 and there was a stoplight there, and right in front of you was McKee Jungle and Gardens. I'm like, Mom, we gotta go there. I want to go to McKee Jungle and Gardens. No, we're not going there. We're going to our vacation home. So I never got to go there. This was the most popular tourist attraction before Disney. It had 100,000 visitors. And these gentlemen, Sexton and McKee, Lloyd Sexton and McKee, had an idea. They were going to buy 80 acres on the Indian River Lagoon, and they were going to have an orange grove. But when they inspected the land, they said, this is too beautiful to tear up and put orange groves here. So they turned it into a tourist attraction. And they made gardens, and they brought in orchids, and they brought in lilies from all over the world. And they had the world's largest mahogany wooden table, and they had this giant barbecue pit. You could cook 2,000 steaks on at one time. And it was a hammock walk. And it had an alligator. Old Mac, he was 12 foot. You got to have an alligator. I talked to Jeff earlier today. He says, you guys are getting an alligator here. So it's going to be in that pond out there. His name's Big Zach. So anyway, they had landscape artists come down. It was quite native vegetation, built this infrastructure ponds. Well, eventually, Disney comes and knocks it out. And then it gets sold to development, except for 18 acres. And 18 acres is still the way that it was. And it sat that way for about a dozen years. And then the Indian River Lagoon Trust comes in, purchases it, and spends about $10 million in grant money to restore 18 acres of McKee Jungle and Gardens. But it was the most popular, closed in 1976. And they purchased it for 1.7. Spent $9 million to restore the 18 acres. Some people were pretty upset that $9 million to restore 18 acres was pretty excessive. But one of the highlights was the 300 magnificent, gigantic, colossal royal palms that were all planted in rows, which is absolutely amazing. I love royal palms. I grew up with royal palms in Miami. They were everywhere. There's the entrance.
Did those survive?
No, but there are still some there, but no, it didn't. It didn't. There's the entrance I always wanted to go through, but I never made it. There was a theme park in Bunnell, Florida, called Marco Polo. It was basically carnival rides based around the theme of Marco Polo's travels. This was huge. 5,000 acres. 640 acres a square mile. It was gigantic. So that was the theme. The theme was traveling to Turkey and Venice and China, but you would do it through carnival rides. And Japan. And the biggest pavilion was 500 acres. It was the Japanese pavilion, and you could take these, kind of like their version of a gondola, what they call sampans, and you could take a ride in it. There was this train track, and you got into the train, but it was like a Model T, and it took you through the pine woods. It took you through the pine woods in a Model T. Then there was another train that went all the way around, and when you got there, you went through the entrance, which was Venice, and it was really interesting. You could see the Florida pine trees, basic carnival rides. And here was the problem. This is funny. This is a bad business decision. When you have a theme park and you're going to put millions of dollars in it, you better make sure there's an exit that you can get off at on I-95. There was no southbound exit that you could get off on and go to the park. You had to go all the way down to Daytona, turn around, and then come back up and get off at the only northbound exit. So that was a huge issue for the park. $2 to get in for an adult, $1 for your child. They raised it to a whopping $2.50. Got you into the park. And it's the Plantation Country Club today, golf course today. But interesting, when it closed, in the Japanese pavilion, 2 mysterious fires started 8 days apart, and the overnight security guard was shot at.
So it sounds like somebody was trying to collect some insurance money to me. But it closed and it went bankrupt and was purchased for development. And that was in Bongo, Florida. I mean, in size-wise, it was big, big, big. There it is. So when you walked up, I don't know what that character is. Is that Marco Polo? Who knows? But anyway, there's Venice. That's where you would de-embark on your trip to the Far East. On carnival rides. Ancient America. Ancient America is in a really fancy, ritzy place. Del Boca Vista, Boca Raton. There is an Indian mound there that was built thousands of years ago by the Tequestas. And E.G. Barnum, who was a famous photographer now today, he learned photography from his dad when he was a young man. And around 19 years old, he gets this idea. I love Native American culture. But he purchases this Indian mound. And he decides to get some archaeologists and make tunnels through the burial mound and then put these dioramas in there and put Spanish artifacts and Indian. So you walk through this Indian mound and here's a diorama that's built into the Indian mound and it's a cannon. And the next one's got a couple of cannonballs. The next one's got a Sioux headdress in it, which has nothing to do with Florida. And then you look at pottery from the Southwest, New Mexico, which has nothing to do with Florida. And then maybe there is some potsherds from Florida. And he had all this crazy stuff burrowed into an ancient Tequesta Indian mound. And so what ended up happening is he decided, it didn't go very well. Attendance was very low. He decided that, most of the tourists coming here are only interested in two things: dog tracks and nightclubs. So he closed it down and he moved it to Kissimmee, Florida, onto 192, because he wanted to capitalize on the traffic going into Disney. And so there's one of his Make a Date with History. He had another one called when he moved it to to Kissimmee, called it Indian World. There's the burial mound, the Barnhill Burial Mound in Boca Raton. There's the archaeologist constructing the tunnels. And there's this person wearing a Sioux headdress, which has nothing to do with Florida history. They used to have Chief Osceola of Florida State wear that same Sioux headdress, and then the Seminole Nation said, that's not what we wore. And eventually they changed it. Might be good sometimes to hire a professional historian. Oh, it had a concrete Spanish galleon out front that greeted you when you came in. That has a lot to do with Florida history, believe it or not. And then there is the entrance to the Boca Marina Yacht Club, and there's the burial mound. So it's now the Boca Marina Yacht Club, which is really, really fancy. So you get into the guard gate, and to the left is Ancient America theme park with tunnels and whatever else. It's almost surreal. It's Salvador Dali-like almost. Surreal. The juxtaposition of two things that have nothing to do with each other: a burial mound and a ritzy fancy yacht club. He also did this famous Bach Towers. Have you ever seen that postcard? That's him. He would hand tint these postcards. He's really the big man on campus when it comes to a lot of these really awesome Florida historic postcards, e.g. Barnhill. Dinosaur Wildlife, which is just south of Weeki Wachee. Now this is interesting. This guy's idea, his spark was, I'm going to make a wildlife taxidermy museum of animals that are very macabre and have two heads and 5 limbs that are deformed. So he basically had a museum of taxidermied animals that were deformed and albinos. And he said that just coming in for people, the price of admission is worth it just to see these albino stuffed animals, because most people never get to see an albino animal. And that's what he promoted himself on. Come and see us. But then he had to have a pink dinosaur made of concrete out front, which he did, to get people into the taxidermy/museum, which is now a barbershop today. And that's no joke.
there's I don't know, two-headed something. Not sure what it is. Two-headed dinosaur? No, we didn't have that. 22 feet high, 58 feet long, US 19, just south of Weeki Wachee. It was the Foxbauer was his name. And he built this weird, macabre exhibits and museums. A museum with these taxidermy animals that were all deformed. And he died, his widow took it over, and it ceased operation in 1998, and then became a barber shop. And you can go, that's been recently restored, by the way. You remember, I don't know if you remember House of Xanadu. Michael Jackson apparently wanted to buy one of these, from what I remember, and I'm not sure if he ever did. 1,000 of them were sold. It was House of the Future, run on a Commodore computer back then. And I remember when we would take our annual trip to Walt Disney, I was like, oh, can we go to the House of Xanadu? I must have been 15 at this time, but I still wanted to go to a tourist trap even at 15 and 16 years old. I want to go to the House of Xanadu. I finally got to go on the night before my wedding. I'm not kidding. I got pictures to prove it. My buddy and I, my best man, said, man, we are bored, man. And I said, I'm stressed out, so let's go do something. We got all these people in town. And so we went to the House of Xanadu, and I'm telling you, I had never laughed so hard in my life. I couldn't breathe for an hour. I mean, I can never remember. I couldn't think straight. I was laughing so hard. Because, you know, they have a Commodore computer, and it was promoting things. This is so advanced. I mean, this is 1993. We got a microwave. And it had all this, it had solar power, was powering the water heater. The problem with the House of Xanadu is that it couldn't keep up with the technological change. So when you went in there, the technology was really still old. And it was made of polyurethane foam. And it was supposed to be really cheap to do. And they had a concrete pad, and they'd make these balloons, and they'd make this weird house with no right angles. And it was 6,000 square feet. It was supposed to be really cheap. Well, the cost in the 1980s, when it opened in '84, if you wanted to buy a house. So if you want to build a house in Xanadu on your property, really piss off your neighbors. If you want to build one, if you wanted to build one today, it was $300,000. Now, if you put that into the inflation calculator, $300,000 in 1982 today is $1,069,000 to build. That's not very affordable, even by today's standards. It was very prone to mildew and mold as well. At its height, it was getting 1,000 people a day. It was on the east side of Disney on 192 in Kissimmee. 6,000 computerized systems that would control everything and make, you know, it's sort of like what Alexa would be today, if you know what that is, that new stuff coming out. But this was the old version run on a primitive computer. Its last incarnation, it was a real estate firm, and then it closed down, and then homeless people were living in it, and then they ended up knocking it down. That's what ended up happening to it. But I'm so glad I got to go back. And on the same trip, we went to the Elvis Museum in Orlando. That's defunct now, too. And I remember, they had Elvis's cars. Oh, I want to see Elvis's car. We went in a big room like this, and all you saw were tire tracks. So I laid down and had a picture of me taken on the tire tracks. Elvis's cars were here at one point. That's gone, too. Here's the beautiful interior of the House of Xanadu, House of the Future, for $1 million today. Apparently 1,000 were sold. There's a sunken living room. I'm not sure if you can fix that, the sunken dining room, but you might be able to fix the sunken dining room. It looks hard to get into. I mean, if you got a bad back like me, man, getting down into that thing looks pretty rough. But this is it, free of mold and mildew. This is early on, and fresh paint. This is crazy. South of St. Augustine, these guys get an idea. Hey, let's take about 100 moonshine stills and open up a theme park based on moonshine stills. And we'll put hillbilly characters from Appalachia to get people to stop on A1A, south of St. Augustine. And this is it. Now, in the 50s, 40s, 60s, moonshining was very popular in and around the St. Augustine swamps. And, of course, during Prohibition it was. And it advertised that you could go through a wooded area and see 100 authentic moonshine stills in natural setting that were seized by federal agents. Fun for the whole family, but authentic. Come on, kids, we're going to go see this booze exhibit. Billy, I know you're only 6, but don't ever get into this operation. I don't want you moonshining, but I do want you to learn about it, but I don't want you to get into moonshining. You don't want any moonshining in Pinellas County. Can you imagine, you got a little forest out here, and you make some trails, and you put all these moonshine still. I mean, they can't look that different from each other. I don't know. I'm not an expert in it. But it was wacky as wacky can be. There's the printout for it. Amazing, authentic, educational, astounding. 5 miles south of St. Aug. Pretty amazing. That is just tremendous. There's another one. But it was all kind of had this hit, because hillbilly cartoons were really popular at that time, so they were playing up on that. 2 more. Man, did I want to go to Six Gun Territory. My older sisters got to go. I didn't. Just down the road from Silver Springs, there's Six Gun Plaza today, which is a huge strip mall there today. That's where it was located. When you went to Six Gun, it lasted 20 years. It was pretty popular. It was very, very profitable until Goliath came and knocked it out. And then remember, we changed more from the natural history of alligators and snakes to this whole fantasy world that Disney creates, and everything's now based on his movies and this, these fantasies. This one obviously is not very authentic to Florida. It's a Wild West thing. 40 buildings. A gentleman from Oklahoma who built all these. They were all real buildings. They were not facades. And they had can-can girls. They had a hotel where the stars could stay. And people falling from roofs, and it had a mountain there, a huge mountain, built out of plywood, concrete, and chicken wire. Taller than Mount Dora. No, it was the largest mountain in Florida. And so you would go on this train, and it would take you from the parking lot to the entrance, and you'd be getting ambushed by cowboys, and there were souvenirs and gift shops, and it was really, really popular. I remember the commercials for it. And the commercials as a kid, they were just mind-blowing. You see, they'd shoot, and you see this cowboy fall off this tin roof onto the ground. It was just, as a kid, it was amazing. Because really, they're marketing to kids. That's what they're really marketing to. They're not really marketing to adults. So you get the kids, because parents always want to satisfy their kids and make their kids, happy. I know I do. I give it to my kids all the time. Opened in 1963 by R.B. Colburn, closed in 84, a Western theme attraction. Now think about this for a second, though. In the 50s and in the 60s, there were 27 Westerns on primetime TV. 7 of the top 10 rated shows were Westerns. But by the mid-70s, things began to change. Welcome Back, Kotter, and All in the Family, and then a slew of detectives, Kojak and SWAT, and you name it. It became passé. Nobody was interested in these old beat-up Westerns anymore. That had passed. It was on 200 acres. A carnival rides again, but on a frontier town. It had nothing to do with Florida history. And it had a train. Now, the train is now in North Texas at another theme park, so it's still around, that train. There's the train. And Molly Hatchet, the rock band, had their cover on Six Gun Territory. That's the famous band from Florida, Molly Hatchet, the rock band. Webb City in St. Pete. Not really Doc Webb. He's not really Doc. He was a snake oil salesman based. He was a patent medicine guy. Patent medicine was not really patent medicine. The only patent was on the name. If they had to actually put the medicine on the medicine, nobody would take it, right? Because, cocaine, pills for children, all that type of stuff. Coca-Cola had some cocaine in it originally as well. So he had this modest drugstore, and then eventually it grew into one of the most unusual drugstores. It had something like 75 different departments in it. It had a hardware store, and it had a beauty salon. But he was a great promoter too. He had an Arthur Murray dance studio on the roof. He shot people out of cannons in the parking lot. He had the 2-cent breakfast. He had the thing where, what was it, if you came in, he'll give you $1, you give him 95 cents, he'll give you $1 back every day. He'll give out $1,000 for 95 cents, that type of a deal. So he had the dancing chicken that would dance for kids, and you had to, of course, everything was, an upcharge. You had to pay for a lot of this stuff. So he had this amazing drugstore, which was the forerunner of the strip mall. And at its height, it was making $4 million a year with about 1,200 employees and 60,000 visitors a day at times. That's a lot. And covered 7 blocks. I believe its location is where Tropicana Field is today. But in the 70s, it began to get run down. The neighborhood deteriorated. And then department stores and big malls ended up cutting into the business. And then eventually Web City closed. Oh, there's Web City right there. Pretty cool. This is the last one coming up next. This was the $100 million. I think I flashed it. The $100 million roadside theme park that failed. Anybody know the name? Splendid China. Do you know the name of the $100 million theme park that failed? It was called Splendid China. And yeah, it was in Orlando, and it tried to capitalize on it, and they had a kind of another Splendid China in Hong Kong that was getting 4 million visitors a year. So they thought, let's bring it over here near Disney. This is where all the other theme parks are. It's going to work. And the problem is that in the Tibetan pavilion and the Mongolian pavilion, most people thought that it was communist propaganda. And so protests started breaking out in front of the entrance. Some 20 different demonstrations. On the 20th demonstration, the brother of the 14th Dalai Lama was there. And then the school systems passed a law banning field trips there because of all the communist propaganda and the way that Mongolia and Tibet were being treated by the Chinese. And many of the Chinese acrobats that would come over were defecting and seeking asylum. So that was bad. So they had to try to hire local people to do that. So eventually it started to lose money. But it had these amazing, there's some of the protests right out there. And they had a Forbidden City, Great Wall of China, Terracotta Warriors, the Grand Buddha, Forbidden City, Miniature Empire's Wedding Procession. There were no rides. No rides. All miniature replicas. Which was pretty interesting. And it had gardens as well. And of course, food and a gift shop. But when these protests broke out, schools were banned. It started losing $9 million a year. And then it closed in 2003. And then the minute it closed, people went in and started looting it and taking things from the park. And then it became like a teens haven where teens would go in there and skateboard and mess around at night. And then not recently, I think in like 2013, 14, it closed. It was bought and demolished. And then they built like some type of resort there.
Crazy.
There's the Great Wall. It was pretty cool, really, pretty neat. What's kind of neat about it is there's no rides. There's no gondola ride. There's no Ferris wheel. There's they didn't. The only connection I can make to that is that the only place in the world where there are 2 places in the world that have alligators and crocodiles living together is China, and Florida. There's some more amazing sculpture that they did. Other attractions are still around. Monkey Jungle and Homestead. I wanted to go to Monkey Jungle, but Mom said you can't go there because the monkeys will throw poop at you and we're not going there. I'm not kidding. That's why we never went. But I wanted to go there. The Coral Castle and Homestead on the way to the Florida Keys is amazing. That's still there. The Citrus Tower is still there. And of course, now all you see now are rooftops. It used to be really cool. You would see citrus. Now all you see is rooftops. Which is kind of depressing. And then, of course, there's a ton of Gatorland, stuff like that. I hope you enjoyed my stories, and thanks for coming out tonight.